In this episode, I want to talk a little bit about the luminance channel and how we can affect this channel to paint light or shadow into it. And that is sometimes very, very useful, as I want to show you here on this clip. And this is another part of the music video. And from the start, you see already there is a color shift in it, and I'll come to that in a second. But at the moment, I want to show you only here just the one rundown from one billboard to the next. And then we go here. And here's the shadow underneath of that billboard, which I just pinned to that wall here. It's all camera mapped, except for some parts, and I want to show you that, of course. First, I'll run this one more time. It's on 10 frames here at the moment, so this is time-lapse here, just a placeholder. Then we come to another little clip from the movie, and then we go here to this. This would be, again, a little bit difficult to do directly on location, and so I had here only just some images and projected them on it. And of course, I had the advantage to just change some parts of the building because it had here some cars on it and so on. This is a preview here. You will see it later, maybe when it's done, with cars on top of it and so on. Okay, so some 3D elements, some camera projection, and all is mixed. And okay, I wanted to say something about the color, because this is a tip that I can't put into anything else. When you have an image that has these lilac tint in it, that's normally a sign, maybe not always, but in my case, it has driven me nuts from time to time. When an image is processed, so it should have a ProPhoto color profile, and then you open it and the application uses maybe a standard sRGB and ignores completely that the whole image should have a ProPhoto, and then you get this color shift. So back to the theme, and I want to show you, of course, the scene here, by the way, and we have to render this. So let's render this first so you can get an impression how fast it goes with all the details and even with 3D objects inside. The area here is completely in 3D, and everything below is just camera projection. So as I said, the color here will be fixed just with the color profile. That's not a big problem, but I wanted to show you that. And then we have here 3D objects inside. This was one object that I have used in the Adobe Roadshow some years ago. So recycling here. Background, just an image, and we have even more background images. And of course, I can show you that here just with the editor camera. And I go out of that here a little bit, and you see here already the big pictures for the reflection only. Then here the Pershing square, where I did part of my jet movie. And so this is pretty much all what I have here. There's not so much more to do here. And that's, of course, already all. And what I wanted to have here is, of course, to bring these little guys here and these billboards with shadow, especially on this wall where we had no billboard, so we have to put a shadow in. And maybe sometimes we want to paint even some light into something like this, when we say, oh, that's nice here with all the reflections from the AT&T tower and the other buildings around here. So maybe I want to have a little bit light here or so to lead the audience eye, and it should look like, of course, very nicely. And to do this, I hesitate to paint directly on to the surface here, and it's kind of tricky. You could go also to use a layer and just overlay this, but my ideal is, of course, more and more to use only HDRI in it, and then it starts maybe to get a little bit tricky in Photoshop. And let's have a look in Photoshop, because there I have prepared already something. So this is very simple here, and you get here already 50% gray. Some would say it's 127 in integer values, normalized to 100% or 255 from starting at 0. That's all relative. When you go to a Macbeth chart, you will find for 50% gray 122, 122, 121 for RGB if you use an sRGB color profile. So it's not that simple just to say it's 50%. However, you find a value in your workflow that works nicely for you and doesn't change the color. So what does it mean? It doesn't change the color or the brightness or something like that. I want to show you that in Cinema 4D. In Cinema 4D, I start here directly with a fresh and new material. I go here to the luminance channel, switch off everything else, and inside of the luminance channel I load an image here inside, and this should be here, this one that we have seen in the HDRI series. So you might be the most familiar with that image, so I don't want to have that in my project folder. It loads a little bit, and that's all I need. What I want to have here is, for the purpose of simplicity, just a plane. And in attributes, I put this here to width 800 because I know from experience this here is exactly 2 by 1. And so I drag this on top of that, and here we have it. So this renders now fine. And when I go into the picture viewer, I get here this image now. And from the start, we name this A, because now we change everything. So I go back into my material. And then we go here just to diffusion, and we go to load color. And that gives me here the option just to type in some numbers. If you go with the idea of the Macbeth chart, then it's 122, 122, 121. But this application works not in sRGB when we stay in 32 bits. So let's try 127, which is roughly 50%. Of course, we could argue it's 127.5, but you know what? Okay, so in the luminance, we have now no change because the diffusion is set to off. When I switch this on, no change at all. You see, it's just nothing because effect luminance is not checked on. So I check off specular, we don't need this. And when I check this on, you will see there should be a change when I switch the channel on, and it becomes darker. This is now a problem because we have to work against this change to stay here with our 50% gray. And then I go to my luminance channel and I type in here, instead of 100%, I type 200% in, no change. And when I go now to the mix mode and say multiply, then we have here 200%, which means 2. In the diffusion, we have 0.5. That means 2 times 0.5 is 1. And that should be exactly the same that we had before, except for the little way around here, so we can have some influence to it. So let's check out how it looks like. And I render this here again, and I don't see any change here. So let's take a look. And normally I expect a tiny little shift here between A and B, and it's pretty stable. We can go here also with compare to difference, and I can't see here anything. There's a tiny little bit here. We can make that more visible here in our filter area, the brightness, and then I can see there is some change here. So you could fine-tune this, numbers up and down, and then you're ready. That can be in the color channel or anywhere else. I would say for camera mapping and all of that, that's for the start okay. So I switch off my filter here again, and difference. Okay. So what we want to do here is, of course, now not to work with the color. This is a placeholder, so we don't have too many textures in it. We go here and load the image. But before I do this, I do something in Photoshop. And I want to have this here in RGB, 32-bit, even if it is a gray one, because then I don't have to deal with any alpha, with any gamma in it. Sorry for the alpha, with any gamma, the Greek alphabet. So the gamma normally is resided inside of the color profile. So every value gets here calculated with the color profile, and then Cinema takes it out again. So it's back and forth, which means we have a calculation twice there. I think that's not really preferable. And the image size will go bigger, of course. 32-bit is certainly bigger, but for the sake of precision, I like to do this. You could stay also with 16-bit and go with a TIFF file. Check this out, which file is finally bigger. So, and as I can't save here gray values, as OpenEXR, I have to go the RGB route here. So I put here maybe just an underscore in, so I have this immediately available. And then back to Cinema 4D, go here into Load Image, have here my OpenEXR. It looks pretty pale because it's the preview and I don't want to have it inside. So looks pretty good. We render this, which goes very fast, and you can see here this is really a brand new one. B again, and I grab here this comparison line, and I think that looks pretty similar to the one that we had before, so no change. I had problems with the gamma based stuff, and as you might notice in my series, I'm not really a friend of anything gamma anymore. So okay, so now you can see we can do gradients here, and even with an HDRI in the background, we can paint now light very easily in Photoshop in it. So when you want to paint the light into it, then I would suggest pick out the camera that you had, leave the stuff in for a moment that has, of course, the reasons for the shadow, get that image as coverage, use the same camera to avoid problems, then paint just the shadow in it on an extra layer, underneath that layer a 50% gray, and if you need some light, maybe there's some caustics from a frame or something like that, then paint some light into it, because it has always an interaction, so have an eye on it. It's tiny sometimes, but exactly that makes sometimes the realism. And the best thing is, of course, that we can go to body paint and paint immediately light and shadow into the scene. And I think that's a big advantage, to not even leave the application. And you see me here just testing different gray values. And you have to find, of course, when you have set body paint as well to linear light, which is automatically included, then it's around 18-20% where the 50% reflectance is then. And so that sums it up pretty much, and see you in the next part. Thanks for listening. Have fun with it.